Good afternoon, everybody. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, and we are continuing our romp through the Budget Adjustment Act. And this afternoon, we have the Department of Taxes first. Commissioner Bolio is here to talk to us. Following his discussion, we'll have the Department of Financial Regulation. Then we'll take a quick break, and then Grady's going to come and do a little more committee orientation about how to read the budget. This might be part one of how to read the budget, but that's where we'll be going. And Aaron is continuing to work on the agenda, so keep looking at the committee page because it gets updated regularly.
So we may work past 2:45.
We may not. I think, did we decide, unlikely that we will have a presentation. That would be a good opportunity for you all to meet with other committees or agencies or whoever you need to talk to about your budget areas. So we want to give you a little time to do that as well. But we're pretty full the rest of the week, so I won't go through the rest of that now, but that's where we are for today. And Commissioner Bolio, welcome to the committee. We have lots of new members this year, so we'll do our go around and introduce ourselves or reintroduce ourselves at the pace.
Good to see you, David, Lee from Morrisville, representing Lamoille, Washington District.
Good to see you. Good afternoon and welcome. John Kosenska from Essex Caledonia District.
Hi, Mike Nigro, Bennington and Powell.
Tom Stevens, representing Washington Chitnett.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good afternoon. Jim Harrison, Chittenden, Mendon, Killington, in Pittsfield.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Robin Shy from Middlebury.
Tiff Boomling from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel, Underhill and Jericho.
Dwayne Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford. And the spelling of your name suggests you might be a cousin of mine of some sort.
There are a lot of Bolios around, and I seem to be related to none of them. Just our own little, I don't know what it is. Happy to try to find a connection though.
Maybe some other time.
I am Mike Murwicki from the Wyndham 4 District, Putney numbers.
Lynn Dickinson, I represent St. Albans Town.
Nice to meet you and see you all again. I'm Craig Bolio, Tax Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having me. I was just going to work through, I think there's just draft language that you folks are working through, not necessarily a bill introduced yet. And
We have the budget adjustment from the administration.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, I was just going to work from that if that worked for the committee. So there are a few things that I would bring your attention to. The first is in section 57, where we have language that is requesting a 1-year delay of moving the effective date out 1 year for the repeal of the telephone personal property tax and telephone gross receipts tax.
Let's find a page number so we can.
Oh, I should have had that for you and I.
42 is what I'm finding.
Okay, perfect.
Down at the bottom, yeah, there.
So this change came from Act 145 last year, and this was something that I think the Ways and Means Committee obviously spent a lot of time on last year as well. There are two relatively small tax types in Vermont: telephone personal property tax and telephone gross receipts tax. It's for, personal property, not real building, not real property like buildings and land, but, fixtures, poles, wires, material supplies, things like that. So we have had telephone companies pay that as telephone personal property tax in lieu of real property taxes for many years. And then there's also an even smaller tax type, telephone gross receipts tax, which is paid by some small companies in lieu of corporate income tax. Those definitions that are in law are really old. I think they were passed in the 70s and have not had a lot of updating over the years. So one of the projects that the legislature took on last year, my department helped with, that culminated in Act 145, was modernizing those definitions, but then also just repealing the telephone personal property tax and telephone gross receipts tax, which would make the new modernized definitions just subject to regular property taxes. There was a little bit of a shift between, it was intended to be revenue neutral in terms of the taxpayer experience, but there was a slight shift in terms of, I think the general fund was scheduled to lose about 2 million. The ed fund was scheduled to gain about 2.5 or maybe 3 million. Part of that bill said, hey, this would be a lot of new stuff that local officials have to value, and that's a lot of work to add to them. can the tax department help with that? We said yes. And we put out an RFP to do that. And we got bids back. And what we realized was we needed a little more time to be able to do it effectively and do it correctly. And so that's what we're asking for here. We're still excited to do that. And we think with an additional year, we can get there. For folks who were in the conversation last year, the tax department is helping with valuation in another area of electric transmission and distribution. I would say this is completely separate from that, but it's just part of that ongoing conversation of where does it make sense to have the state support with local valuation and where not. So it's really important from my standpoint that we get this right as part of that broader conversation, even though they're distinct pieces. So that's what we're asking for there. So it means that the experience this year is that taxpayers will just pay the telephone personal property tax and telephone gross receipts tax as they have, and it will become part of the grand list for April 1, 2026 instead of April 1 of this year. The reason it's in the BAA is because absent any action on April 1 of this year, it should all be on the grand list, and we're not prepared for that.
And how much are we talking about in terms of value of the taxes?
I believe that the telephone taxes combined are about 2.5 million for fiscal year 25, but they've been going down over the years. That was part of the reason for the modernization.
Okay, okay. Questions?
Of course, I'm comes from Franklin, so we have a local telephone company there, and I know they were concerned about that evaluation, doing those evaluations on this.
Yeah.
This, it sounds like this will help them.
Yeah, I think that was what it was trying to address, and having my department help with that. We're going to contract with somebody who's got expertise in this area who can help provide some values. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So I'll move to the next pieces if we're all good with that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
any other questions?
So section 52, I have this on page 37. I think that's where you just got a sort of a list of some reversions. So I just figured I'd go through those that are related to my department.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So 2 of them are related to our operating budget, and then 3 of them are related to grants that my department pays out. So the first is tax operating costs, 1.267 million. So we had a larger than normal surplus last year, in part because we had to stand up the childcare contribution payroll tax that was part of the childcare bill. As part of that stand up, we received 17 new positions, I believe 15 new positions for that, and 2 positions for the commercial appraisal and litigation assistance program. So we're really good at recruiting at the tax department, but that was a lot of positions even for us. So we just couldn't get them all recruited in that first year. And in fact, in the legislative process, we had said they wouldn't all be necessary in that first year. So that just meant our vacancy savings were a little bit higher than they normally are. We're past that point. The program has stood up. We've recruited those positions. So I'm expecting that vacancy savings to go back toward the historical levels. There was also a one-time savings that we sort of found in the middle of the year where we contract with a company called Fast Enterprises for our main IT system. It's a really awesome system that's totally transformed how the department does business. But we renegotiated essentially a payment schedule with them, which didn't reduce the amount we paid, but it delayed one of the payments a little bit from one fiscal year to the next. So we ended up with a little higher surplus in the fiscal year than we intended. So those are the pieces for our general operating costs. I would expect both of those to be sort of one-time unusual events, and not indicative of things going forward.
Okay, you've got a few more down here.
Yeah, happy to keep going.
Yeah, okay.
So the reappraisal and listing payments is the next one on my list. That's 35,000. So that's the supplemental piece that is where the state helps with valuation of complex properties. It started with hydro dams, but the legislature expanded that language a couple of years ago to be complex commercial properties as well. So that fluctuates year to year, how much is used, depending on where in the cycle those, usually the properties are valued through like a settlement, and that will hold for several years. So it's where in the cycle those are. Also is what the litigation costs are from year to year can be, let's call it, can change, right? Can be dynamic. So we do expect that the base number is the correct number because it's been that for several years, but we know.
60,000?
Yeah, I think it's in somewhere between 70 and 80, I think. But yes, that's
think
the
that's-
appropriation we're talking about. So we don't recommend a change to the base there. It's just sometimes it comes in under, sometimes it comes in a little over, and we're able to carry some pieces forward. And this one, I think, is part of a reversion.
Great.
Use tax reimbursement is the next one on my list, just under 38,000. So that is the hold harmless for towns on the current use program. That often has a little bit on the bottom line because it's a forecast at the start of the year to basically say what we think the hold harmless total will be. And in this case, I think we were off by less than 0.5%. So we're pretty close. But that usually has a number on the bottom line. Two sort of bigger ones remaining. One is the renter rebates, which is now the renter credit program. This was expected and actually the driver behind one of the reforms the legislature passed last year. Folks may know this program. This is to help low and modest income Vermonters pay their rent. For many years, it was known as the renter rebate program. I think three or 4 years ago now at this point, it was reformed to the renter credit, in part because the income limits hadn't been changed in 20 years and the program had been budgeted for $9.5 million for a long time, but the state was spending less and less each year on it because those income limits had not been adjusted. So it was reformed. They're now inflated. We use HUD values. The challenge that we ran into is the first year, I believe was either 2020 or 2021, there was a lot of federal money in the system, which counted as subsidies for the program. So it was really difficult for us to figure out if the state was truly spending the right amount on that and that it would self-correct once the federal subsidies were out of the system. Our analysts worked hard to try to figure out to try to isolate those effects, even though there are still some of those subsidies in the system, to understand what the true spend could be. And that resulted in us coming to the legislature last year and asking essentially for a 30% increase on the income limits, and that got passed. That is effective for this coming filing season. So the stuff that folks are going to start filing later this month and through the spring. So our hope is that as we go forward here, you're going to see that number much, much smaller. And much closer to that 9.5 million. But we're still just making sure that we're getting those dials turned correctly and getting more assistance out to those.
This is sort of the tail of the old way.
That's right.
That the new one will be coming.
That's right.
And but we aren't changing the amount we hear every year with the 9.5 million. That's staying.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're going to actually use it.
That's right.
This is Mike Nigro's area, by the way. So
Oh, cool.
I had to give up tax.
We can get way in the weeds. Happy to. The last is in the special fund, the Child Care Contribution Special Fund. I think it's in the special fund. Or is that in the, sorry, I don't have the actual language in front of it. It may be in the general fund piece, but the child care contributions, it was just under 3.6 million. There's two pieces in there. The first was that when we costed out, actually, I think it was the general fund portion, because I know we got a piece appropriated to us for the IT implementation. So we had to stand this up in our VTAX system. When the definitions were first working through the legislature for the child care contribution payroll tax, they didn't quite line up with employer withholding. And so when we costed that out and when it went through that budget process, we assumed that it was going to be stood up as sort of a separate tax type in VTAX, a standalone thing, which usually costs about $1.5 million or $2 million. By the time it got through the legislative process and we were able to sort of get under the hood with everything, we were actually able to do it as part of employer withholding, which is what employers who are just withholding on normal wages file with us every quarter. So that's a big win in terms of our overhead at the tax department. It's a big win for taxpayer experience because now they don't have to file a separate tax return. And it was a big win for savings because it costs way less than it would have if it was a standalone tax type in our system. So that's the
kind of the IT piece that you thought it was going to cost.
That's right.
Systems.
And that's right. Didn't cost what we thought. Cost quite a bit less. So that's the first piece there.
Harrison.
So I just want to understand, Commissioner.
Sure.
This line that you're being proposed to revert back to the general fund, this isn't anything to do with the subsidies or assistance for childcare. This is the setup cost for your department.
That's right.
It talks about, well, I mean, it's an abbreviation, but childcare, I don't know, see contracted positions.
Yes.
That's a lot of positions if it's 3.6 million that you're taking out. I mean, great, but,
Yeah, so
there's something else too.
well, part of it is that IT spend, right, which was, I think, 1.5. But the other piece is there were I think 15 positions in there for administering the childcare contribution. We need 15, but and I'm not exactly sure why this happened, but we were very clear that we did not need all 15 fully funded in the first year, right? Because you're standing it up. And then what you really needed the 15 for was when it was stood up and the program's running and people are filing and you need people to answer the phones and update it and answer questions and all that. You don't need all 15 fully funded for the whole year, but that's how it ended up coming to us.
Okay.
So we sort of knew that there would be a surplus there because that was not what we had asked for, not what we thought we needed. So that's why I think you see a big chunk there is that's most of 15 positions plus the IT spend.
I think we put them in for starting on day one, all 15 or something.
Correct. And we had said to stagger and, give us a few, but
So that number would now be in the base though for your budget for next year.
that's right. Yeah, as part of the childcare special fund. It was funded out of the general fund in the first year as the startup cost. Now it's part of the childcare contribution special fund.
Okay. So since we're talking about childcare, and I know it's not part of the reversions that you are talking about specifically here, but you did start collecting July 1st, the 0.44. And so I'd be curious for a little interim update here on how that's going. I'm sure it takes a little while for it all to sugar off and compliance, and is everybody doing it? Are they doing it the right way? What are you finding so far?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head, Madam Chair. Like we did a lot of outreach to make sure that people were aware of this. When it comes to payroll withholding, a lot of companies, particularly big companies, multi-state, multinational, use payroll service companies, which do a lot of your HR functions, sometimes just your payroll. So we have a lot of communication with the largest payroll processors in the country. And so they had a lot of awareness. We think that for the most part, we've got pretty high compliance, and it's not as high as you have with established tax types, right? Because there's always going to be some people who either didn't hear about it despite your best efforts, or who are not quite doing it right. So we've gotten, let's see, what's on July. So we've gotten one quarter. We're about to get the second one, right? Because the second,
So it's a quarterly
October
kind of thing.
That's right. It gets paid throughout the quarter,
Right.
just as employer withholding does, and then it gets filed every quarter. So the first filing would come in October 25th, and now we're about to get the second one, which is the October to December quarter.
Okay.
So we had noticed some areas of noncompliance in the first quarter in October, and our team is doing a lot of outreach with that. It's a combo of things. It's where we can, we do automated letters. We also do individual outreach, business to business, right? We've got people who can just make phone calls to those businesses, say, hey, did you know you have to pay this? Here's how to do it. And I'll be curious to see sort of what the impact is when we get the January quarter. As well,
Which
to
should be
make sure that
basically Friday. So next week we ought to know what that is.
Yep.
Okay.
And most of that will come in electronically. So, the stuff that comes in via paper, when it hits us on the 25th, we won't have all of it.
Sure, but that's
Next day, but that's right. So we'll get most of it.
And does the money, after you collect it on a quarterly basis, does it go into the child care special fund?
That's right.
Okay. And do you know how much was in there after the first quarter?
I do not have that number at my fingertips, but I could get
Is that something you could just, email back to me?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Paris.
So the tax is 0.44% of payroll.
That's right, of wages.
I believe the statute says the employer must pay 3/4 of that, and the employee can pay 1/4, but it's sort of at the discretion of the employer.
That's correct.
The employer wants to pay for the whole thing. Do you have any sense as to how many employers, or what percentage of employers are paying the full amount versus how many are paying what they're required, 3/4 and 1/4?
I don't have that at my fingertips. I believe that I can get you that information though, for the first quarter.
That would be great.
I think I can get that. I believe with how we've.
And I don't know if it's differentiated. All you care about is the 0.44.
Well, they would
So-
know because it's a personal versus corporate, so.
Well, it's all paid on, no, it's all paid on the same form because the quarter of the 0.44% can be withheld from employees' wages.
Right.
So it all gets paid, the whole 0.44% gets paid by the business on their employer withholding. But I believe we're differentiating what I, and I'm going by memory here of what the form looks like in the update, so I don't want to misspeak and promise you something that I can't get, but I think we have it in aggregate. I mean, an employer could even, for instance, choose a different point for one employee to another. But I think that we've got employer by employer, what share are you covering and what share are the employees covering? And we could aggregate that and provide that information for the first quarter.
90-10, for example.
It could be,
As
yeah.
long as they're,
It can be no more than a quarter is the law, yeah, but it can be 0 to that quarter.
okay, thank you.
That would be great. So those two things, how much and what's the.
Absolutely. I'll follow up with email if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, great, thanks. I know you have more, so if there are any questions here, let's continue. Is that,
I don't have more.
what about the property transfer tax?
Okay, so that, now I'm channeling what I had heard from Commissioner Gresham. I believe that is just shoring up what was put in law last year with the act that tweaked the percentages for property transfer tax, because generally they have been, the language has been not withstood, and then it's just budgeted. But then there was the act, and I don't have the number, but that changed that added the second home property transfer tax.
Right.
That changed the percentages, and then I think this is shoring it up. So essentially to be what was expected from the language last year.
So do you have any sense of how much more we're bringing in as a result of that second home surcharge?
I believe I could get that for you as well.
Thank you. We like data in this committee.
We have some.
The more numbers, the better. I know you guys have always been good with that. Any other questions for the commissioner on any of these pieces? Looks like we're good. And so that's everything we need from you for the moment.
I believe so.
Okay.
But I'm just next door.
Yes. Thank
Just
you.
nicer on days like this.
Yes, I know. Well, thank you. We'll see you for when the budget is out.
Absolutely.
We'll be having you back at that.
Absolutely.
point. So.
Thanks for
And
having
then,
me.
so for committee, again, Mike is your connection to Commissioner if you have any questions as you start going through it all. So,
Perfect.
great. All right. Thank you so much.
Be well.
Stay warm. Erin, did you say DFR is on, they're going to be online? Yep. Okay, great. So are we allowed to start a couple minutes early if are they there?
Yeah, I've been getting.
Okay. We'll start with DFR. I'm gonna get a break early. 2:00. Who has DFR? Should know this. A lot of my previous portfolio. Great. See Sandy. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Are you the only person from DFR or is anybody else joining you?
Dave Cameron will be joining. He's our budget person.
Oh, okay.
Yep, he's got all the answers.
Oh, all right.
It usually does.
Great. Well, I know we finished our last one a couple minutes early, so we thought
Hopefully you'll get a little bit of a break.
we'll get a little break after this. Yeah. Yep. So I kind of want to hold off on
Yeah.
introductions until he's here.
Sure.
And maybe while we're waiting, Sandy, you can tell us where we should be looking in the budget adjustment documents for DFR? Is it in the language or is there some in the spreadsheet too? There's some in the spreadsheet.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out if I have the same version as you do.
Let's see. Yes, on the very last page of the spreadsheet committee, right, under just under reversion, transfers and reversions. 101B3 are three things there, and they'll talk about that. And there may be some language also, probably also under transfers and reversions.
I don't think the language is any different than what's on the spreadsheet.
Okay. Here we go. Yeah, so that would be at the top of page 36 is what I'm saying, which is section 51, which I think is exactly as you said. Same thing. Let's see. Oh, and here we have Dave. Welcome.
Hello.
So we will get started. We have new members here, and so we'll go around the room and introduce or reintroduce ourselves, and then let you guys take it away.
Good to see you. Dave Iacoboni from Morrisville. I represent the Lamoille, Washington District.
Good afternoon and welcome, John Kosenska from Essex Caledonia District.
Hi, Mike Nigro, Bennington and Pownell.
Tom Stevens, from Waterbury, representing Washington Chittenden.
Hi, Jim Harrison, Chittenden, Mendon, Killington, and Pittsfield. Welcome.
Hi, Robin Shy from Middlebury.
Tiff Lilly from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel, Underhill and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford.
Hi, I'm Mike Berwicki from the Wyndham 4 District, Putney and Dummerston.
Hi, Lynn Dickinson. I represent St. Albans Town.
Great. All right, and you guys can introduce yourselves and take it away.
All right. Sandy Bigglestone. I'm the acting commissioner here at the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation, and my prior to being acting commissioner when Kevin Gaffney retired at the end of the year, I am also the deputy commissioner of the captive insurance division. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me?
So far, yep.
Okay, good. David Cameron, I'm the Administrative Services Director here at Department of Financial Regulation.
Great. Thank you. So we don't have a lot from you today, but it's not what we usually see from DFR.
Yeah, so I assume we've been asked here to talk about the downgrade of our revenue projection for our direct app at the end of state fiscal year 25. And I think it can be, so just as a background, every month we try to do a review of our projections, and at the end of December, we then talk to finance and management and discuss with them if there's any adjustments to the budget adjustment that we can make for the current fiscal year. So that's what we've done. There were 3 areas that we saw where we were thinking we'd like to adjust a little bit. The first one actually is a correction. In my projections that we had the original $66 million, I had included 1.1 million from our financial regulation fund of revenue that finance management was going to sweep, not realizing that they had also included it in a different section on the bill. So in essence, double counted. And regardless, it's been swept already in June, so it wouldn't be, or in September, so it won't be part of our direct app coming in this, well, yeah, the end of this fiscal year in June. So that was 1.1 million of the downgrade. The second piece was in our securities. We, about roughly 83% of our total revenue comes in a one January payment that we receive early January. We received that the first week of this January, and it was slightly lower than what we had expected, roughly $700,000. So we downgraded our securities projections for the year. To give you some perspective on that, the payment we had this January was about 2.7% increase from the prior year as far as our sales agent count. The prior 4 years to that, it had been averaging 8% increase. So we do feel like the increase in our fee had a negative impact on our sales agent count, which we also, this is a good segue into the third area that we downgraded was insurance or appointments. This was somewhere where we had former Commissioner Gaffney had been hearing at national meetings that companies were a little weary of the fee increase as well. So we were worried that we weren't going to see the revenue that we expected. So we downgraded that. We had built in a 4% increase prior to the fee being increased last year for this state fiscal year. So we took that 4% increase out. So that was roughly $1.6 million. So that, in a nutshell, is the 3.3, I believe, that you guys are seeing on the Budget Adjustment Act.
That's captive. That last one was captive insurance?
No, the last one was just regular insurance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'd take questions at this point if you have any.
Yes, Rep. Harrison.
Can you walk me back? I know we increased the fees last year for the mutual funds and whatnot. Are you saying that we're actually generating less revenue than we were a year ago, or just less than you would have projected had there been no fee increases?
Less than we had projected if there was no fee increases.
So we sort of reached the point of diminishing returns, I guess.
Yeah, securities is an interesting one to look at. We have some pretty good data on securities, and the last time we raised fees, we actually saw a 10% decrease in our account, but then it seemed to bounce back over the next 4 or 5 years. So this could just be, a one-time reservation from people, and may bounce back in the next few years, but remains to be seen. But yes.
So related to that, one of the concerns is always if some companies that may not do a lot of business in Vermont, do they pull their products from Vermont, and therefore Vermont residents don't have those investment vehicles? And I'm curious as to your reduction in registrations or fees. Is that now for translating itself into a reduction in the investment vehicles that Vermonters face? And if so, what's the extent of that? And should we be looking at reversing that, or is it too late?
Yeah, so I think I'd defer to our Deputy Commissioner of Securities, Amanda Smith, on that, but I can navigate back to you. But I would just again point out that the last time it bounced back, so maybe it will bounce back again. We're not sure, but I'm sure she's looked into it, and I'll have her get back to you guys on that.
So this has happened before. You've had sort of a initial dip, and then it has increased again. Is what I heard you say. Okay. So we don't know yet. We don't know yet because we're in that initial dip part, not the bounce back part. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. What I failed to mention with insurance is I mentioned in securities that we get the bulk of our payments in January. In insurance, it's quite the opposite. We get them in June, so it's hard to predict, in January what we're going to see in June. But the majority of our, well, not majority, it's probably 40% of our fees will come in June. So obviously at that point, we will have a better picture of what we're seeing out there.
On the insurance side, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Do you have a question? Rep?
Just see if I'm following this correctly. So you had estimated 66 million, but then you had 1.1 million from that, and then another 700,000 from that. So is your revenue, am I reading it right to say that your revenue projection would be 64.2 million or something like that?
I believe it's 63. Sorry. 63,560. Yeah. So the insurance is going to be so it's 1.1 of the banking, 700,000 from securities, and 1.6 from insurance.
Okay.
So really, it's 2.3 of it is the dip part, and 1.1 was a double count.
Correction. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And if it would be helpful, we could have Deputy Commissioner Smith maybe give some narrative around the cyclical swing of the revenue.
Thank you. I think you'll be back for the FY26 budget, and that might be a great time to talk more about it.
Okay.
Because it is what it is right now for budget adjustment. So I don't think we'll be making a lot of changes to what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
So great. Any other questions from the committee? Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate it. Erin, do you think Grady can come in at 2 instead of 2:15? I will. Okay, we'll check on that. So, yeah, Barcos, you're free to go. Thank you for coming. Committee, we're going to see if we can get Grady in here at 2. So we'll assume that that's the case. We can let you know if it's different, but we assume 2.